everyone. Um, my name is Sonam Gupta. I'm a data scientist turned into developer advocate, surviving on a regular doses of coffee to take my PhD to the finish line. And today I'm here with Sandra from Cohere AI to talk about LLMs and more. If you are in the generative AI space, I'm sure you must have heard about large language models, also known as LLMs. But if not, that's totally fine because I will briefly talk about it before Sandra and I get into the fun discussions on LLMs. But before we get started, I have Sandra here as my first guest, and here's a limerick to get to know her a little bit more. Are you ready, Sandra? Let's
Yes,
go.
it is.
Given correlations she's found, Sandra's skills are treasure unbound. At Cohere, she's a star. LLM apps, her avatar. Her enthusiasm, world renowned. With passion, she builds and explores. Tech wonders like seashells on the shores. Through, through wonders, through travels wide and far, she shines like a star. Enthusiasm in all she adores. So if you seek innovation's key, look to Sandra, you'll surely agree. In her world, code takes flight like a traveler's delight. In her limericks of tech, so carefree. All right. So, welcome to my first episode of my podcast, which I would like to call the AI Chronicles. And let's chat about one of the most intriguing and interesting topics in AI, large language models. The first question that comes in mind of many is, what is a large language model? Well, LLM is an AI that uses natural language processing and deep learning systems to generate human like text with an enormous number of parameters trained on vast amount of data. So several examples you might have heard of, such as ChatGPT, Cohere's command models, and Coral, BERT, GPT-2, GPT-3, and so many more. LLMs are being used in various ways and industries like education, retail, healthcare, and you just name it. But of course, these models come with a huge set of pros and cons. And many of these advantages include, for example, you can use these models to be a research assistant to a grad student. I mean, I'm a live proof of, or could help you stay productive at your task, or or summarize the long documents which might be time consuming for a human to read. On the other hand, trusting these LLMs or trusting these chat mods could result into incorrect fact or information, or if somebody decides to seek medical care from these chatbots, say that's not the right move. But with these in mind, many people have built a ton of applications with with using the fancy generate language models. And a few, I guess, use cases that are on top of my head. For example, virtual assistant. You could probably might have chat with on Walmart website, for example, or generating an application using these LLMs to help you write um, come up with blog topics or even cold email replies or even check your grammar for your text. But I guess I hope this gives a good enough idea about what LLMs are. And if anybody want to dig into these, into the technical aspect of it, I would strongly suggest follow LLMs or follow the Cohere blogs. They're very informative. One of my personal favorite source. And of course, there's some courses on deep learning AI. And these are just some of the resources that I um, refer to. So, right, well, that was enough out of me. And I am just pumped for you to hear some LLM use cases from the lens of Sandra from Cohere AI, which, by the way, is one of my favorite companies. So, are you ready, Sandra?
Let's do this. Thank you so much for
Awesome.
having me, Sonam.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's super, super fun to be here. And also, thank you so much for this incredible poem. I am awestruck and I don't know how to continue moving forward, but I just wanted to say I really
Totally.
appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about some beginner-friendly questions before we can, so that we can encourage those curious minds even more. So my first question to you is, How does someone new get started in this space?
Mhm. I love beginner questions. This is something that's like the closest to my heart, I think, and
Hmm.
that's because I don't come from this space originally. I have a background in philosophy and liberal arts. That was my education, and I kind of like started professional life as an entrepreneur, and then moved to AI, and then to large language models, where I am at currently. So, in terms of
Awesome.
being a beginner and starting something from scratch, definitely I can tell you a little bit about that. And the very exciting thing about large language models is that it's a very young space and it's still evolving. It will grow when it comes to market adoption, and there will be more and more things to do, more and more things to work on. But already now, if you want to join the space now, please do. We need your help. There's plenty of things to work on, plenty of
I
open
agree.
problems.
Hmm.
Exactly, and it just keeps on growing. And one one cool thing to realize is that there are different types of jobs in this space. So, for example, there are jobs that are related to hiring or sales or developing the product or developing the underlying models behind the product. So, depending on what your expertise is or what your curiosity is, you can go these different paths
Either ways. Mm.
while working directly with this technology, and that's an amazing thing. And that means that honestly there are no limits. Like you can jump into the space from anywhere, from literally anywhere. So yeah, and on top of that, you mentioned already that there are incredible courses, resources out there that you can use to develop deeper your knowledge into the space. I think the favorite two examples that I can mention is large language models with semantic search, the
Mm-hmm.
recent course from Deep Learning AI,
Yeah.
done in collaboration with Cohere, obviously. That's why I'm loving it so much. Semantic search is an incredible and understated
Yeah, I
use
believe
case
so.
of this
Yeah.
technology. So it's definitely worth checking out. Also, as Cohere, we recently launched something called LLM University. So this is an free online course um, with no prerequisites that is for people from all sorts of backgrounds, also
Right.
for advanced folks. Like anybody can find something for themselves there. And it takes you from, it's a very good primer for understanding. It takes you from the theoretical foundations of large language models through use cases and into the sort of realizing the extent of business potential, sort of. So there's more and more great resources online out there, so check them out. But also, um, don't be afraid if you're a newbie to this space, because you can enter it from literally any angle right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I second Sandra because I have been there, done that, and I sometimes still feel that I'm a beginner because there's a lot to learn. So take the first step and move on. Okay, thank you so much. I have another question which is kind of like an intertwine to the first one that I asked you, but is there any one piece of advice to someone new trying to transition into this space, say from software engineer or product management, for example?
Yeah, so I think one piece of advice, single one, would be realize that the progress and your career path is not linear, um, and embrace what you're interested in at the time in relation to large language models, and it will take you to the right place. I think there's so much of imposter syndrome in this space, and it comes from people with incredible backgrounds, incredible research backgrounds, incredible software dev backgrounds, sales backgrounds. People feel like they don't know enough, and to be fair, it's such a young space, and it's constantly changing, that it's really hard to grasp it in its entirety. And it's a very good moment to enter and to start learning and to, move along while you're learning. Just like you mentioned, do the first step and move forward. So yeah, I think the most important thing is just to have this confidence that you will progress, like whatever next position you will take. And the best thing you can do for yourself to be the best at your job and have a lot of energy and be curious about it, etc., is to just follow what interests you the most. For example, I could enter this space via trying to be the best programmer, but I've tried. I have like very basic understanding of Python. I've tried programming here and there. I am still playing with it occasionally, but I know that this is not something that my heart desires.
Right.
I know that
Right.
creating narratives, explaining education, creating content, videos, this is something where I really feel excited, and I can
Right.
do my best work because of that. So yeah, I hope that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice and suggestions. Yeah. All right. So it's time we move to the LLM use case questions. So, my first question to you on that is, what are the different use cases you have worked on or working on using LLMs, whether it's at your work or any side project you would want to talk about?
Yeah, so I have a confession to make when it comes to use cases. So I don't work directly on projects. The reason for that is because I am much more interested in somebody else's projects. And if I feel like I can bring in some value, I might join it, or I might
Mm-hmm.
just help it by sharing it out there into the world. And
Right.
this is
Right.
something I'm focusing on right now. But a couple of months back, I initiated a project called Pokédex, Poc AI Dex, to
Okay.
be precise. And so this was basically an app that, based off of your selfie, came up with a new name for a Pokemon species,
Okay.
and then came up with sort of like Pokédex, index description of this Pokemon. What is its habitat? What is its weaknesses and strengths? What type of Pokemon that is, and some fun facts. So yeah, that was that was my most recent use case, which is a very silly one, but it was pretty fun to develop, and also quite some lessons learned from that one. But to be frank, I want to be better at making more projects by myself. Right now, I am a little bit lazy, and that's why I'm just like exploring the most interesting use cases out there from much smarter people than me, and just trying to communicate it further.
No, it's always a good start, right? That it helps you get started, and maybe like, help you think about some other ideas. So it's totally fine whether you're working on your own use case or, trying to join somebody else's. It's totally worth it.
Oh
Awesome.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. So did you ask me about my favorite, or
Yeah,
not yet?
yeah. I was going to like if
Okay.
there is any favorite use case that you have worked on or want to work on, or just want to talk
Yes,
about it.
definitely. So right now, I think the most exciting area that we are entering, that we
Mhm.
haven't fully entered yet, and there's so much to explore, is retrieval augmented generation,
Mhm.
and making sure that whatever the LLM is outputting is grounded in some sort of information
Right, right,
that you feel represents the state of
mhm,
affairs correctly.
right.
So the best types of use cases I'm seeing right now is things that are using chat capability with retrieval augmented generation, and are able to plug into a web search, for example, or
Mhm.
some sort of data that you've previously specified.
Right.
I really like our Cohere's Coral Slack bot. We
Mhm.
have a bot that is not that is just like a private. It's still kind of a toy helping us to figure things out when it comes to the product development.
Mhm.
And this Slack bot is plugged into our Notion knowledge base.
Okay.
So we're able to, whenever we have a question around company policy or how many days of vacation do I have, or
Right.
things like that
Right.
related to the company, you can just ask Coral and it will give you the answer, the
So
correct answer.
basically, for RAG to use with Coral, are you saying that your company data for like for this private version of your of Coral, so you're training, giving the company data for it to train on so that it can answer based on that. Is that right?
So not even train on, it just plugs into that data.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And whenever it gets a question,
So
it
it just refers to it, kind of.
yes, yes,
Right.
yes.
Awesome.
It searches through that data, grabs the most relevant piece of it, and then generates a response based off of that.
That's clever. Awesome. Yeah. So do you think like from all the use cases that you have worked with or came across or took your interest in, what are some of the pain points you might have come across, or what do you think the pain points were from it?
Oh yeah, so that's a very interesting one. So I would say the biggest pain point is not specifying your primary use case and functionality.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen so many projects via hackathons and other activities where people have a sort of like a rough idea of, let's say, building a personal assistant with large language models.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you ask them, so what does this assistant do for you? And it does everything. It can generate text, it can respond to your emails, it can check what weather is out there and let you know to grab a jacket or something like this. And because it's so general, like because the specific use case is not there, you cannot fully focus on it and develop a solution that will really hit the nail on the head. You have this sort of superficial exploration of a breadth of different types of tasks and capabilities, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just a shame, because most of the time, if you just focus on one single task to solve, that's kind of the best thing. So that's one pain point, but it's not even related to large language models. It's just about the
Yeah.
ideating stage and thinking
Right.
about what it can do. When it comes to LLMs specifically, there is just like an entire world of problems that happens once
I can imagine some.
you like first of all, like, it's very easy to create a proof of concept. So
Right.
demonstrating certain capability, demonstrating that LLM can solve a certain task is fairly easy at this stage. What's
Mm-hmm.
the most challenging right now is taking this proof of concept and developing a product out of it,
Mm-hmm.
developing a system that other people will want to adopt on everyday basis as a tool, and then also scaling that tool to multiple users at the time and assuring the quality, privacy, security of it, etc., and etc. So there are a lot of pain points when
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
developing different use cases. Yeah.
Yeah, but the one main one that you pointed out was the privacy and security. I believe that is something everybody who's developing LLMs, especially at scale, um, they should like people should realize that whatever you're feeding, whatever the LLM is generating, it must be like, made sure that all these kind of points are considered before releasing it to users, I believe.
Yes, so different providers of LLMs have different policies when it comes to that, and it's very important to check what kind of policies out there, so you're not surprised.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's one thing. And then second thing is that there are so many companies out there that just cannot afford to send their proprietary data to a third, like basically like an alien cloud provider, third party out there, because it's a violation of so many rules and sort of like checks that they have in place to make sure that their business stays intact. So it's really important to be able to figure out a way to use LLMs, I would say, on your own premises, and that's what most companies, especially at an enterprise scale, seem to be doing and seem to be the most interested in.
Right. Fair enough. So that leads me to the next question, and this is something I think about that everybody should, especially in the generative AI space. So, like, what are your ethical considerations for whether you want to talk about your related to your use case or just in general about LLMs or generative AI?
Oh damn, that's a that's a really broad question as well. So let's break it down
Sure.
slowly, so it's easier for me. Okay, so ethical consideration number one, and that's nihil novi. Nobody is surprised about this one at this stage, because we learned that AI systems tend to be biased based off of the data that they've been trained on, the distribution of that data, and so forth. So ethical consideration number one, making sure that your model has the least amount of bias possible.
Yeah, that's well said.
And if you are able to identify any shortcomings, communicating that to the user, and also just making sure that the outputs of your LLM are not harmful and hurting anybody. So bias is number one. I think as I mentioned, it's not a new topic. Companies have been working on making our AI models less biased for years. It's an entire discipline of research, and so we're really, really sensitive to that, I think, as a species at this point.
Right.
There is an interesting challenge associated with bias, which is the value system of your LLM. So, okay, like let's say you managed to achieve a state where your model is fairly neutral and pleasant to deal with for the majority or like entire population. But what kind of system of beliefs does it have? What kind of system of values does it have? Does it know what's wrong and what's right? That can it back it up somehow? Things like that. So this is a very interesting and tough, I think, area.
100%.
So that's one. Then you have security, right? Like, what do you do with the data that companies or individuals are sending to you while interacting with the model? How do you make sure that the model does not use any proprietary data or data that has a copyright that belongs to somebody else? We come from this Wild West where models were just trained on the entirety of the internet. Nobody was thinking at that stage about
limitations.
Yes, like whose text is that? Are there going to be any legal ramifications? Should these people get paid? Things like that. So very important questions, I think. And then I also see another ethical consideration where you need to pay attention to how people are using the models.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as a company at Cohere, we are really focused on making our models the best possible usable versions of themselves and making sure that they provide value to various businesses out there. But there are different types of businesses, right? And people make money off of things that we don't necessarily agree with as a company, or I don't agree with as an individual. And there have been quite some cases in the past where companies, LLM providers, had to block certain business users.
Oh wow. Okay.
Because they didn't meet the sort of ethical standards of this company.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Awesome.
yeah, it's such an interesting area, but there are
There's
many
ton to consider. Yeah, 100%. And I think even understand what the ethical considerations are, people could either train or even start thinking from that point of view as well, in my opinion. So yeah, thanks a lot for mentioning all the considerations. So awesome. So that was really a great, discussion over the different use cases and ethical considerations, pain points, and such. So, to conclude our talk, I do have few open-ended questions that I continually think about. So, for first question is, what do you say to people who say AI is stealing their job?
Yeah, that's a common one. I would say I'm being asked a lot about this, and I understand the anxiety surrounding fast-paced changes that we see on the job market, and also where we are at when it comes to the economy, that we're hitting the recession and nobody knows how it's going to play out, etc. So I completely understand the anxiety there. And I am not qualified to tell you whether we are at the beginning of this AI adoption, and it's really hard to predict reasonably anything that is related to how many jobs can be replaced with automated systems, and to what extent, and also how companies will go about it when it comes to, okay, we can automate this task now. Do we train the group of people that were executing this task manually so far to do something else, to oversee these systems, or to collaborate with them, or to move on to an entirely new area that we didn't have space for in the past? It's really up to the employer as well, not only to the employee. But I think regardless of how it's going to pan out, I think it's important to understand that AI is changing fundamentally the way we interact with computers and with data and with text and with all the other modalities like image and whatnot. And this change is happening as we speak, and it's not going to slow down, and it's not going to stop.
Right.
So whatever happens, it's a wave that's coming. So instead of putting a lot of energy into feeding your anxiety, I think it's better to take that energy and put it into trying to figure out, how do you ride the wave?
Right.
How do you adjust to the exponential progress of the technology that's completely mind-blowing?
Exactly. Don't feed the anxiety. That's a very important lesson there. Yeah, I agree. And okay, so last question. So, do you think if the innovation, do you think it is the innovation in generative AI going in the right direction?
Yeah, so I think we've touched on it when it comes to the ethical considerations. So it's a very important question, but also it's very important to define what do you mean by the right direction.
Right direction.
From the technology progress standpoint, the progress as I mentioned, in my view, is exponential, and it's completely mind blowing. So it's going extremely well, when it comes to the process of discovering more and more capabilities and use cases. But you also have the side of the coin where AI is just a tool, and how people are using this tool. To what purposes are they using this tool? And here, from what I have seen so far, we are overwhelmingly, as human beings, using generative AI in constructive ways. But of course, there will always be people with a different value system that we don't agree with or we don't want to support. And that needs to be somehow addressed. And it's a tricky thing, and it will take a lot of collaboration from both the companies developing the models, but also the governments, the regulators. And hopefully we will be smarter about this than when we were during the social media phase, humans back. But I think overall, with certain filters on top of it, I think generative AI is going to be incredibly good for our productivity, for augmenting our thinking, everyday thinking, and also like big scale thinking. I don't know if you've ever tried, but I like to challenge text generation models in terms of coming up with ideas and then discussing them.
Yeah. Played around a little bit, yes.
And how it helps you yourself as a user to, see a broader perspective.
Exactly, yes.
Because you're in a dialogue with something that seems to be responding in a coherent way. So, your thoughts can form easier as well.
It might help you be creative as well, I guess.
Yes, creative, help to make things faster, to move faster with things, and hopefully free up time for, thinking more about the outcomes, the fundamental right or wrong of our actions. But yeah, TBD. For now, I think we are definitely going in the right direction as a humans plus generative AI team. Let's see how that's gonna look like in 5 years from now.
Yeah, I like how you said human and generative AI as a team. That's pretty cool. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Awesome. Thank you, Sandra, once again for your time and all the insights that you talked about today. And for dear listeners, if you wish to get in touch with Sandra, please feel free to follow her on Twitter and join Cohere's Discord channel as well. And on the channel, you might find me, and as well as you can reach me on LinkedIn and Twitter. But yeah, thank you so very much for this discussion.
Thank you for having me once again. And yeah, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or thoughts. And definitely check out our Discord where we talk on a daily basis about questions such as we talked about today. So hope to see you there.
Thank you so much.